It's always the best part. Now we're recording. So we are now recording and we are live and we're letting people in. And we're all just smiling. If we all freeze, will people think that their computers are frozen? We won't do that though. Okay, so it's 3:03. We had a 3 o'clock start. So we will just slowly get into our session here, just as people are still, where did that link go? Where is it? And I'm getting the thumbs up from behind the scenes. So where are my notes for the things I need to remember to say? All right, so first of all, o siamsiayet aitna squalawanzi quitsnala, antha Rhiannon tlichna humathquiam e Feminists Deliver. Eatsen Slenny, Eatsen Quam. My dear friends and relatives, it gives me really good feelings to see your little names and the tiles and faces of our panelists here today. My name is Rhiannon. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm from Musqueam and Feminists Deliver. And I am a strong woman. Woo! So just a few housekeeping things before we go into it. Just to let everybody know that this event is currently being streamed live on Facebook and it is being recorded. We do have closed captioning services available for those of you who are in the Zoom webinar. You just have to click onto the little button down there that says CC and you'll be able to access those. And also just recognizing that we are having our conversation today in a colonial and trade language of English, and recognizing that it is not accessible to everybody. And we do aspire to host these webinars in various languages, as languages should not be a barrier to accessing information. However, at this time, we're faced with limitations as a grassroots organization that make it challenging to provide accurate and good information in other languages. We also acknowledge that internet and tools to tune in is a privilege, and we are doing our best that we can in the situation that we're in. The internet absolutely should be a utility and not a luxury. And we just really thank you all for joining us in our journey as we work towards creating a more equitable world and equitable spaces. So we ask for your attention at this time. If you must go on social media, please remember to tag Feminists Deliver social channels. We are on Twitter at FemDeliver, Instagram at Feminists Deliver, and you can find Feminists Deliver on Facebook. You can also use the hashtag FDIWD2021. And please be aware of the emotional labor that racialized people will have to take on, especially Black and Indigenous peoples. So share your thoughts with non-Black or non-Indigenous folks after. And please do your work outside of this discussion. We have opportunities for you to connect with your fellow attendees for our post-event chat. If you have not signed up for that, please register for that by 4 p.m. today so you can get the link in your inbox. We've allocated some time for you to ask questions, so please use the Q&A feature, which is also down there. Q&A, not the chat, Q&A, to ask your questions. And we will do our best to get those questions to our panelists. We will not read out your name for the sake of the recording. And then stay in touch with us at feministdeliver.com at the social media handles I gave for you up above. Whew, that was a lot. So super important, the post event is going to be a great space for networking. I know we're all really starved for that connection. You know, we used to go to all these events and have opportunity to spend time talking with each other. So we're doing our best to try and provide that in the current context that we're in. Okay, so we're just going to dive right into the questions, if that's cool with everybody. Everyone's bios and headshots have all been provided in all of our media and marketing for the event. So we can save some time and we can just dive right into our conversation because all of you have enticed everybody to come here to listen to what you have to say today. And if they don't know who you are, they can go back and look at those links and find all of your amazing bios. Cool? Cool. Okay. So the first question, you have about 2 minutes each to share on this one. So let's start with the movement that you're currently involved in and what compelled you to be involved and how long did you get started? And we'll start with Sleydo.
Hadi Sleydo Sydney, Gidim Den Hesley, so Tennis Den. Thanks so much for having me on the panel today. I just want to talk a little bit about how the movement that I'm involved in. Some people mainstream call it pipeline protesters. We all know that it's about Indigenous sovereignty, about land back, about justice for all people, all humans and non-humans on this planet. And I've been involved in it actually for a really long time. So just recently, the land back hashtag came out and everybody's throwing that word around, land back, but I've actually been land backing since 2012 when my family and I built a cabin out on our territory at Ludispin and have been living out there raising our now 3 children. And so this has really been an ongoing struggle, obviously, that's been going on for generations before me and that will be going on for generations after me. And so really it's just about doing all the work that we can right now so that our children and grandchildren don't have to work so hard. And so I'm super grateful to all the women that have gotten us to this place in our history. So thanks for having me today. Awata.
Hi, Chikasiam. It's so amazing to have you here with us today. Tasha, I have you next on my list to go.
Sure. Watching it, Dr. McWapi, and it's I'm really happy to be here with you all, or be in our separate spaces but together with you all today. So the movement that I have been born into, like many of us, is the pursuit of liberation for Black and Brown women, and it's at the forefront of my mind today, of course, on International Women's Day, and also just days after the first birthday of my daughter. And so I was reflecting this morning about International Women's Day and having a daughter, and how and I had this memory of being pregnant and finding out I was having a girl child and being just momentarily completely crushed by the fears associated with what it means to protect a little Black and Indigenous girl living in this world. And then being overcome by just the knowing that we are in fact just the present day manifestation of the ancestors that have really been keeping our nations alive and thriving since before we have memory. And so that's the movement that I know that we're all a part of and that my daughter is now inheriting. And so I thank you all for the work that you're doing in your own territories, so that little girls like my daughter can navigate the world freely and with joy, as she has the right to do. I go say.
Great, thank you so much. Tai.
Hamakas Katsiya Laloit Kina, Inem Munik Wasatit Watit. So it's great to be here. I'm thankful. And I also mentioned that my name is the storyteller in our Indigenous language of the Nimipu people. The movement that I'm in is really at the intersections of Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty, because I carry both identities. And what that looks like is socio-political resistance, awareness around issues that affect missing and murdered Indigenous women or Indigenous Two-Spirit folks, as well as addressing and dismantling anti-Black racism within Indigenous communities and beyond. And then, you know, there's the dismantling political systems in general, since they are couched on white supremacy. I think I'm the one on the panel that's from the United States, so my perspective is like of that of a bloody American, right? Like, so I want to name that my I talk about the racialization of the United States more than anything. And I use storytelling to champion radical inclusion and to do this liberatory work. I am very grateful to be able to be in spaces with other Black and Indigenous activists, social change makers, etc. And how I got started here was, this is entirely ancestral. I have grandparents that were civil rights activists that founded NAACP chapters in the Chicago area. And I've also had, I come from a long line of incredibly powerful, furious, big, loving loving matriarchs who taught me to challenge conventional wisdom, to question everything, to use critical thinking in every part of my knowledge seeking throughout my entire life. So that's how I ended up here, and through the whole time doing my best to tell stories in a good way and make room for folks to tell their stories based on their experiences with oppression, marginalization, racism, etc. So thank you for having me. Yol kalo.
Hi, Tricia. Siobhan.
Hello, everyone. Alafia, Gumgobo, and Nyan, which means peace, everyone. So I'm involved in a number of movements, all equity-based, that center around inclusionary practice in disability justice, in food justice, in body liberation. Those are the main areas that I find myself called to work in and intersect with my own lived experiences. I too have a history of family that brought this awareness into my being. My father was an amputee and lived with that throughout his life. And as the child of someone living with disability, physical disability, it certainly brought an awareness into my life. Now, as someone living with disability, it is expanded multiple fold into both that awareness and advocating for access needs of others. In terms of body liberation and its intersection with diet culture and weight stigma that's perpetuated through what's sometimes called fat phobia, this is something prevalent and that intersects quite significantly with ableism. So as I work in food justice, I carry those awarenesses into my work and into the communities that I intersect with and hope to contribute to. And I'm very pleased to be here today.
Hi, Chika. Thank you very much. And I'm having a 3 o'clock brain break here. It's Lyra, right? Did I get that right? Lyra. Okay. Thank you.
Lyra. I just want to say thank you for having me. I come to this panel as a staff member of PACE Society, which is a for, by, and with sex worker organization in the downtown east side. And so I'm primarily in the sex worker movement. I also identify as an advocate for trans rights, and I am a white settler, but I attempt to bring anti-racist practice into my work whenever I can. So I came to the work from my lived experience as a sex worker, as a trans woman. I have lived experience of drug use, homelessness, and a lot of my experience in these areas happened since I moved to Coast Salish territories. I'm originally from Texas in the United States as well, actually. And I am just really grateful to be here today. Thank you so much for having me, and to all the other panelists for being here.
Thank you so much. Can we just take a moment and just reflect on what an amazing panel of people we've gotten together? Like, we don't have these kind of perspectives brought together to talk and share space and lead nearly often enough. So I'm just getting a bit goosebumpy over here with the power and the knowledge and the wisdom that we've gathered here today. Okay, so question 2. No, we did question 2. Did we? No, we're doing question 2. See? Okay, question 2. In the movements and communities you're a part of, to whom do you show gratitude for the work, courage, and sacrifices they've done to get us to the progress of where we are? And the first person up on my list is Tasha.
So I'm the youngest daughter of Leslie Spillett, and she is just an incredible Indigenous activist. And I say that with so much pride to be my mother's daughter. And she is the daughter of a woman who, was a Cree woman, but wasn't so proud to be an Indigenous woman. So when I think of just the time between my grandmother and my mother, how much work had to be done in my own family line to bring back our traditions, our culture, and our love for self, it just makes me swell with pride to be my mother's daughter. And then now as a mother, I'm always thinking about how, quite literally, like as a Black and Indigenous person, all the women that I come from have always manifested creation in bodies that wars continue to be waged upon. And yet here we are, like I'm looking at your faces, and we're sharing space with one another, still breathing, still creating. And so I owe a debt of gratitude. I owe literally the breath in my body to the women in our bloodlines, and their refusal, their absolute, I guess, unwavering commitment to always reach for life and reach for growth. And I'm so thankful for that.
Great, thank you so much. It's a powerful story to share. Thank you. And Lyra.
I think there's so many ways to answer this question. But right now I'd like to highlight Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, and Miss Major, and other femmes of color who have been at the center of, really, there's so much overlap between the sex workers' rights movement and the trans rights movement. And so just all the femmes of color who have really paved the way for so many of us. And I think someone who is doing really great work more recently is Janet Mock, who has really done a lot for trans rights and for sex workers. So those are just a few that I'd like to highlight.
That's great. Thank you very much. So much work, incredible work being done out there. It's nice to take a moment to reflect on that. Siobhan.
So when I saw this question, I immediately went to, how am I going to answer this in 2 minutes? There's so many people that have come before that have contributed to the road that I'm able to walk. Of course, my first thanks go in the direction of my family. They really opened my eyes to the notion of intersectionality before it was even had been a term coined at that time. So, can't mention intersectionality without mentioning, of course, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. And, it's the notion that we live with multiple identities, and those identities each carry value and cannot be parsed out when we are addressing inequities, disenfranchisement, and oppression. And when we look at the tenets of white supremacy culture, and that being the sea that we're all swimming in, there's so much that has been done to move us forward, both in our understanding, but also in the actions that have been taken to move various steps forward. It's not a question of ever one and done. It's a decision that one makes every day to engage, to notice, to try and enact change. And so for all those that came before and made a choice to try and enact change, whether it was in a small or large, or whether it even needs to be quantified to what degree change was made, the decision to engage, for that, they deserve thanks.
You go. I think you did it just right in the 2-minute mark. It was amazing. Okay, getting a note that we are all on time. So if we need, we'll make it a soft 2 minutes. If you need a little bit more space, then go ahead and take that, because we've been doing a really great job of staying on time so far. Okay, so now we're turning over to Sleydo.
You shouldn't have said that right before I came on. Because I have a lot to say about this in answer to this question. Okay, I'm gonna quickly take you through my journey a little bit. And like Tasha, of course, first and foremost, I have to say my mom. She's been a survivor of the 60s scoop, single mother of 2 girls our entire lives. And she didn't know much about her culture. She didn't know anything about her culture, lived in white foster homes. And so it's been a long journey to come full circle for me. But she definitely drilled it into our heads that we were brilliant, intelligent, beautiful Indigenous women our whole entire lives. So there was no doubt, you know, no matter all of the racism that we experienced, all of the statistics that we know are in our lives all the time and on a day-to-day basis, you know, that was always first and foremost that she drilled into us. And so she really overcame a lot and did everything in her power to help us come back home and to be connected to our community. And so really a part of that big journey was in university for me. I did a master's degree in Indigenous governance and, you know, read all of these amazing academic and community women that had all these amazing things to say. I learned, you know, one of my sheroes is Ellen Gabriel, who is the spokesperson during the Oka crisis, and just really strong role models that I could look up to. And then when I first started getting involved, when I moved home with my son, when he was first born, Kanahos Manuel was one of the people that I really looked up to because she lived on the land and she raised her babies free. And so that really inspired me to move back onto our territory and raise my babies free. And then coming full circle, once I connected back into our community and one of our matriarchs, Timberwolf, I always go back to her mother, Sarah Joseph, who also held the name Timberwolf, among other hereditary chief names within our nation. And she just overcame so much and had done so much to make sure that her kids and her grandkids knew the language and were connected to the territory. She would go knock down moose. You know, her husband passed away and she had a ton of kids to feed and a whole farm and territory to look after and feasts to put on for, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people. And she did that work all on her own through many hardships. And so when things get tough, I always remember these women that have gone through faced such great adversity and come out the other side with so much grace and dignity and so much to teach, and are so you know, so giving and gracious with their knowledge. And so I just want to give a shout out to all of those amazing humans that have inspired me and that continue to help me in this work. And of course, my sister who's come through the same journey, my sister Jen, and stands beside me and everything that we have to go through today. So I just want to give her a shout out too.
So beautiful. Thank you. I'm so envious of folks who can go out and live on their land. My territory is so developed and colonized. My heart aches. You know, I've got so much. Yeah, I love when I hear other people who have the ability to go and do that, and just wish that I still had some of those opportunities. But anything that I can do to support other Indigenous people being able to do that is where I leverage my privilege of being in a metropolitan city. Okay, and Tai, do you want me to read the question over again, or you got it?
No, I got it. I'm staring at him. Yeah, no, this is great. So whoever put together this table, like I have a Capricorn, so like my big cap energy loves spreadsheets. Here for it. So I'm thankful that we have this guideline. And I feel like gratitude is the place that we should start. Gratitude and love. In any part of this social movement work that we're trying to do. And I even hate to call it social movement work because it really is just community building work that Indigenous folks have been doing since the beginning of time. Of course, we got to shout out moms, right? Not just my mom, but the other women who stepped in to mom me when my mother couldn't. And that is those are the moms who, you know, I got whipped by, who may or may not have given me, you know, like somebody to tell secrets to when my ears were pierced the first time. So all of those moms who are not necessarily moms, but also aunties and grandmas that filled those spaces in my life. And I'm a big believer that when one woman rises, we all rise together. So those women who were trying to elevate me also elevate themselves and elevate the whole community. My beloved community that I've been able to create for myself, I've been able to create for myself in Boise. I'm on Niwa and Numu territory. That territory is commonly known as Shoshone, Bannock, Paiute, and Yakima nations. And these folks down here keep me fed when I forget to eat. They keep the house full of groceries when I don't have time. They make sure that I'm physically safe. A lot of our work down in Boise, Idaho last year resulted in several death and rape threats to my person and to my family up on the reservation as well. So to have people who stepped in to make sure that I was physically safe and physically well kept are the beloved community that I didn't know that I needed until they all showed up for me. So a lot of gratitude there. I can't have my own children as a result of sexual violence, but I'm a big believer that my big brother had my babies for me. So he's got these two beautiful nieces that will be my descendants, and their children will also be my descendants. And they remind me to be tenacious and curious and energetic, but take naps and eat all the snacks. You know, all of the lovely lessons that we can learn from children, I'm forever grateful for, especially when we have to take this work so seriously, not only for ourselves, but for future generations. And when I do smudge, I smudge for myself, but I smudge for the strength of my ancestors who allow me to carry this work that is both deeply intergenerational and deeply interracial. And that poses its own conflicts and tensions and learning edges. But I'm from very, very powerful matriarchs, and I'm forever grateful to have that level, that kind of ancestry, and to know exactly whose name I need to call into a space when necessary. And then of course, those celebrity women who help us to stand in our power. I was able to host Story Circle several weeks back with Dr. Angela Davis, who has been a childhood heroine of mine, and to like be able to actually form coherent sentences to her while she's in the same space with me was just a surreal experience. Nowadays, I'm a really big fan of Ijeoma Oluyo and her work to dismantle white supremacy and patriarchy. So the celebrities are just as powerful. I mean, they've been given an opportunity to really have a huge platform, but they also deserve grace and gratitude from each of us. So humakas katsiayao for each of them.
Thank you. Justine is responsible for the amazing spreadsheet that we're all working off. So shout out to our hardworking communications specialist at Feminists Deliver, Justine. Love you. Okay, question number 3. Did we do 3? I've been so intent listening to everybody, I forgot what question we're on. We just did gratitude. Okay, we're on 3 now. I got it. So what have you been most proud of to celebrate so far in your involvement in your movement? So where have been those moments of celebration? Because we need to find them and celebrate them. So Siobhan, you are up first this time.
Well, in terms of celebration and finding moments of joy, I definitely identify with that being a step towards revolution, that just finding joy in these difficult times is a revolutionary act. I am deeply pleased with the movements in food justice that are seeing ancestral reconnections to the land in Black and Brown communities. I find this very inspiring, and it's something that I feel will nurture us for many generations as we move forward in this work, which can be heavy at times. I think that seeing life come into being as we plant and as things grow nurtures our souls as well as feeds our bodies. And the disconnect within Black and Brown communities because of past harms done through the legacy of enslavement and land theft is one that has made many of us turn away from the land because it was seen as a source of pain, a source of oppression. So as we reconnect to the land, this is bringing great joy, and how that intersects with working against colonialist practice of food apartheid, and how that intersects with ableist views around diet culture and weight stigma. These are also pieces that I find spark joy for me. And I hope I bring that joy into the communities that I work in.
Thanks, Siobhan. All right, and Tasha, where are you celebrating these days?
Well, first of all, I gave birth to a whole human during a global pandemic, so I feel really proud of that. Also, I think I immediately started thinking of the Freedom School that we were able to have here in Winnipeg. So Winnipeg has a very large urban Indigenous population, and a few summers ago, we were able to have a Freedom School, under the name Red Rising Freedom School, that was led by Indigenous people to ensure that urban Indigenous young people had a chance to come get educated in the ways of our people and the ways of our communities, in ways that are that reflect themselves and are worthy of them. And I think, Siobhan, you're talking about food justice, and I just had there was this incredible moment where we were planting a garden in our urban Indigenous community, and also taking like these young people around the community, and we made little medicine, we called it like medicine bombs, but we were trying to figure out a less violent word for it, but we're taking these little bundles of medicine and planting them in areas that historically have ingested a lot of pain, those physical areas. And so that was really a beautiful thing for our community. And then to watch the medicine grow in these places where they have been missing for so long. And so I just think of that time with those young people, and I hope to see more of that in the future, and also see what comes of these young leaders that are coming up. And I think that's the best way to invest our energy right now. So those are the things that have brought me joy.
Medicine sprinkles? medicine sprinkles? Yeah, that's definitely want to give some thought to that. I love it. I'm going to think on that. I might text you in the middle of the night one day with, aha, this is it. Lyra, what are you celebrating these days?
I think there are a few things that I could highlight about my own involvement, but I'd like to decenter myself, I think, and focus on the peace team. I really just want to give my teammates a shout out. We operate off of a consensus-based model, and which means we make all our decisions together, and everyone's voice is important on the team. I couldn't have dreamt up a better organization that represents my personal politics and or what I aspire to be. And so I'm just really so grateful to be able to be working at PACE. And I'm looking forward to a time after more people get vaccinated where I can really start engaging with our members a little bit more, which has been difficult during COVID. But yeah, just so grateful to the PACE staff, the board, and especially our members.
Great, thank you. And Sleydo?
Well, thank you for asking this question, because a lot of times I'm asked to give updates on what's going on down on the front lines, and it's depressing as all hell. So I get to talk about all the good things that have happened. Did anybody notice how much youth are throwing down these days? Indigenous youth. Yeah, that's what makes me happy is all the Indigenous youth that came out during Shutdown Canada, that were activated, that have organized themselves in amazing and, really impactful ways. And I'm really excited about their movement. I'm really excited about how organized and how well they're doing in what they're doing. When I look back at what I was doing when I was that age, it was definitely not organized or political at all, or any of those things. So I'm really, really proud of everything that they're doing, especially, what happened at the legislature, and the throne speech and so-called Victoria, the braided warriors that are thrown down right now and super organized. And I feel like all of the connections that we've made with the movement that we're building here in Wet'suwet'en territory, the connections to the different nations that really showed up for us when we put the call out, and where our territories and our people were under attack. So many different nations showed up, so many people showed up, and threw down in really important ways. And that is always inspiring to me. And that's always, I'm always really proud of the connections that we've built and the connections that we continue to build, and those alliances that we have. We have some really ancient alliances that have just come back to life since this all started with our Gixan neighbors. We've created new alliances that are super important, that I feel like are going to last and grow for generations and generations. So many people that I've talked to in my lifetime doing this work are like, oh, if just all the Indigenous people could get together, they could really do something. Well, guess what? All the Indigenous folks are getting together, so watch out. And we're not only getting together as nations, but we're getting together with Black folks and other people that are, other communities that are racialized and that are oppressed, and that want liberation and justice for their families and their communities and their nations and their lands. So I'm really excited about that, and proud for what we've built as Wet'suwet'en, how much we've brought forth the idea of our Indigenous governance, and how much people know about that now, which I think is a real step forward to know the difference between our hereditary system and band council systems, and all of those kinds of things. So I'm super proud of all of the people that have been activated, and that I believe are going to make huge, huge changes in our lifetime and for all the future generations. So how's that?
Love it. Getting us all riled up. It's not against the law for us to gather in groups of 3 anymore. So look what we can do when we're not arrested for showing up. Well, I mean, we are, but that's a whole other thing. Okay, and we're on to question number 4. So in what ways have you had to adjust your goals or campaigns because of the pandemic?
Thanks so much. I'm going to answer number 3 because I didn't, and then go right into number 4. No, I can do both things. We're decolonizing the spreadsheet now. Damn that spreadsheet.
Got it. That's right. Okay. Sorry. Thank you for...
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot much more to offer other than the fact that I'm really thankful that we're all having a moment of celebration, despite how relentless and tiresome and extractive some of our work is when it comes to social movement spaces, decolonization spaces, justice and truth spaces. Like, those are all very cumbersome. Sometimes they're very slow. Sometimes they're very violent. I had a relative of mine tell me that when I just asked how she was, she said, I'm so tired, and it's the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. And that's so true. Like, that's ancestrally tired. Like, we are just exhausted. So these moments of joy, yes, I want to celebrate all of the young folks that show up and are so powerful in the way that they organize. I want to show up to the elders that are still here, like that are still doing this work after their entire lifetime, sometimes full centuries of what we call social movement work now, but it's just their survival. I talk all the time about how activism, it looks like activism to white folks, but it's just survival, cultural survival to me. And so I am very proud of those elders that still show up and offer their guidance when they can. I'm proud of women just stay holding it together, right? Especially young women and girls with their tenacity and their strength and their patience and their dedication. I think that goes unmatched, unseen, and uncelebrated. So that's something worth noting. And it is worth noting too, like the way that we have to adjust to the pandemic is in fact something to celebrate also. So I'll jump right into that question also. It's like, I recall some of my white colleagues making it sound like it's the easiest thing in the world to just shift into using technology to do social movement work, to do community building work, when they forget that many of our territories and reservations are some of the most remote rural prisons that colonizers could possibly find for us. And because of that, there is no internet access. There is no way that even the highest ranked technology on the planet could connect to the internet without satellite, right? And that's not accessible economically. It's not accessible from a capitalistic standpoint. So how do we adjust? And it had to be twofold, not only, yes, leveraging technology, but how are we also leveraging and redistributing resources so that those folks who are in those remote and rural places can have the technology and the hardware that they need to get logged in, and then showing them how to do it. Who's going to invest in that learning and that teaching model? You know, like that's super duper important. So that was one of the big adjustments. And then how do we, you know, leverage, not even leverage, I'm going to say, how do we tap into the unused resources of young folks to be the leaders in our movement and our goal setting work, because they are already so tech savvy. They are already on their technology. They're already doing the movement work from their tech spaces. And we just, we have a bad habit of championing for young people rather than letting young people champion for themselves, rather than letting young people take the lead. And so that was a risk I took on a personal level in social movement work that has been incredibly fruitful, as well as something that I encouraged other folks in community to do. Like, why are we trying to reinvent the wheel when we have an entire population of young folks ready to do this work energetically with the hardware that they need to do this work? Like, I didn't know what was happening in Sleydo's movement until I looked it up, and there were a bunch of young people like really showing us what's happening and doing it on several platforms, like 5 or 6 different social media platforms. So there is no excuse for our non-native neighbors to not know what's going on unless they're deliberately trying to ignore it. Yeah, thank you for letting me offer that.
You're welcome. Which they are so good at doing. They're so good. At
so
doing that.
great.
You know, like just this names like talk about like indigenous and Black resistance, right? It's like we have never stopped. Like we've never ever stopped resisting any of this, and it's yeah. So I'm glad that we're here together to talk about that and to highlight that the resistance has never stopped, and we are just finding ways to better connect our communities in that now. And then, okay, so then Sleydo, over to you. Like how has the pandemic adjusted your goals and campaigns? Like, because Shutdown Canada was pretty active, and then the pandemic hit. So did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the pandemic hit at the same time that I gave birth to my third child, Winnie. So everybody was locked down, and I was locked down too with the newborn baby. And so yeah, I hear Tasha saying like we having a baby during a pandemic, that's a thing. But it really has impacted us in huge ways. I mean, a lot of our work on the territory relies on people being out on the territory and monitoring the territory and resisting on the ground and doing that, you know, doing direct action, organizing with one another in secure ways, which don't involve technology. And so it's been really hard for us to also just keep the story going and to keep people informed, because all you ever heard about for the last year on the news is COVID. And people were shutting down Canada. Like Canada got shut down and it was amazing. And it was one of the, it was really, really powerful to see that happen. And then all of a sudden, you couldn't find it anywhere in the news. And, people thought we kind of just dropped off the face of the earth and everything's fine now. They signed the MOU and, things are good. And so people kind of were involved in their own, survival in ways and, trying to cope with this pandemic. So it's been super impactful in not so great ways. It's also helped us to get more creative and focus on other campaigns like investors and insurers and social media campaigns, put a little bit more effort into that. But I feel like we had pretty solid social media campaigns to begin with. But yeah, so we're just still figuring out what that's going to look like in terms of our community, because of course our elders and our language speakers, we're not willing to put them at risk. So we don't have big call outs for people to come to the front lines and, and throw down, because we can't risk that happening. But at the same time with COVID and knowing that all of our chiefs and all of our community members were locked down in their homes, Coastal GasLink and the pipeline company and the RCMP decided to ramp up work to the fullest extent and put our communities at risk. So it's definitely had, and we're still kind of weeding through that and seeing how we can come out the other side even stronger. And so I think that when the restrictions start lifting and we start being a little bit safer, we're just going to be stronger than we were before.
Exactly. And it's such a typical Canadian thing for how many Canadians have ever forgot that hashtag shut down Canada was a thing. It wasn't even that, it was like a year ago. And I bet there's people here listening to us today who have either forgotten or never heard of it, because it's this Canadian thing about forgetting about Indigenous resistance until it's actively in front of them. It's frustrating and fascinating and bizarre all at the same time. Okay, Lyra, so what kind of goals have you had to adjust for in campaigns for during the pandemic?
So sex workers, especially sex workers who do in-person work, face an immediate loss of income during the lockdown at the beginning of the pandemic, and many sex workers were ineligible for government relief because it requires that you file your taxes, and due to criminalization, many sex workers are unable or unwilling to file their taxes. So we ran a sex worker relief fund starting in March of last year and through the summer, and distributed a little over $150,000 to sex workers in need, prioritizing BIPOC and trans and two-spirit and non-binary sex workers in the application process. And we started a meal delivery program for sex workers who needed nutritious meals delivered. So it's also affected a lot of the funding. Like our funding for our meal delivery program runs out at the end of March, and the sort of randomness or ineffective way that the government has addressed some of these issues has definitely impacted us.
Yeah, that's a lot to try and juggle and balance and find solutions to. So I'm hoping we'll have a donation link somewhere that will be shared so that folks can contribute to some of those funds. And Tasha +1, what goals and things have changed because of the pandemic?
So this is Isabella Gishiko-Ayabik. She's just over a year old. So hi, aunties. So I think Sleydo was talking about having to be creative. And I think one of the most important things that we've learned over the past year is been reminded of how reliant we are on one another and how important our kinship systems are. I know myself as a new mother, I've been desperately lonesome for the kinship that I thought I would be able to count on in person, being a new mother, and that just hasn't been possible to be there. And so finding creative ways, innovative ways to make sure that we're staying connected when we have to be physically apart, including how to do our ceremonies. So how do we do the ceremonies and the protocols that we have to do while keeping our knowledge keepers and our elders and our families safe? And so, for example, like our Sundance season is around the corner. Lots of places weren't able to have Sundances last year because of the COVID health restrictions. And so those ceremonies, those songs, those rites of passage are all incredibly lonesome for us. The land is lonesome for us as we are lonesome for the land. And so it's important, now that we know we're in this for the long haul, to start thinking about how do we recreate those things in a safe way? And then how do we also, Indigenous people are incredibly, we are good at evolving. And so how do we use the tools that we have in the present day to meet the needs that we have for our communities? And that might mean going against some of the older protocols that we have around using technology to connect with one another during ceremonial times. But but these are the things that we have to do to ensure that little ones like this still have a chance to be immersed in their cultural identities as they grow up. So being creative is really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Okay, we are on to question number 5, unless I've forgotten anybody again for this moment. I think I got everybody. Did I forget you? Okay. Sorry, Siobhan.
Now I feel called upon to, share something extra special, but my thoughts on this are very in keeping with words that have been spoken into our panel circle here today. Working in delivering food programs to families facing multiple barriers very much had to call upon looking at alternative ways to support and engage with specifically those families, but also to go beyond that and continue the community building. For my programs, we started to do food hampers that would then go out to some of the same families that might have been accessing the wellness, nutrition, and knowledge sharing programs. I also coordinate a food program with the Hogan's Alley Society in Vancouver that brings hampers and community building efforts into the downtown east side, specifically with residents of the Nora Hendricks Place facility, but do extend beyond that as we yearn to connect and stay connected with Black and Brown residents of the Lower Mainland, specifically Vancouver. Now, some of these programs, as has been mentioned, can and have pivoted to online options. And as I mentioned that, I feel called upon to note that in disability justice communities, many of the things that have been brought into being because of COVID were already taking place in communities living with disability. And it is worth noting that the tenets of disability justice became things that were integral in allowing us to engage more fully through the period of COVID. Things like looking at recognizing wholeness or sustainability or collective liberation work, and how that would then position what we would engage with and how we could offer when we look at what is needed and the ways that we're open to safely engage with folks. That became well, something new and quite beautiful, because we were now again looking at those ways to community build. So, for example, with some of the working groups that I'm involved with, when it was outdoor based, when it was garden based work, there was a certain level of safety that we could follow certain protocols, but because we were outdoors and because Vancouver is afforded so much weather that we can be in for such a long period of time, that we can engage in many ways while being outdoors. As things got colder in different parts of the country where the weather didn't allow for as lengthy a period of staying engaged with outdoor activities, again, in the intersection of who has access to things like internet, to computers, to the technology that made the online pivot possible, brought forth its own challenges. And for some, that meant supplying equipment to communities in order to, where internet was available, to encourage that community building to continue. And that did often come through sponsorship and support by organizations that either were supplying funding or equipment to facilitate that. For me, as an immunocompromised person, there's very few things that I've been able to do in an indoor capacity since COVID. And because of the disabilities that I live with as well, mobility is often a challenge as well. But these are considerations that I found within the folks that I was also community building with. So being able to integrate that in really became a new way to almost better address people's needs. The things that have come out of people saying, wow, this can be done remotely, or this can be done in this way that would have never been considered before COVID. And the communities that weren't afforded that consideration, the Black and Brown Indigenous communities that were often still at the front of a lack of consideration and a lack of access points for things that were often assumed to be available equally to everyone.
Those are all very great. That was just me. I forgot to turn my alarm off. Thank you very much for that. Okay, let's see if I can get through a question and remember to ask everybody to answer it before I move on to the next one. I just also want to let people know that Tasha has had to sign off. She's had to go and direct her attention to her little one and her family. So she's had to part with us for today. Okay, so question number 5. We've got 2 more questions that we sent out in advance, and then we will have time for some questions that I believe are being compiled in the back door. Okay, so question number 5, looking to the future, what is your vision for where the work is going? What needs to be prioritized or focused on now? And I think this is important. And what advice do you have for young folks looking for ways to be more active? So we'll start with Siobhan.
So, I mean, I really feel that the future calls upon us to recognize the interconnectedness of various movements, that if we're not able to see beyond our personal lived experiences to the need to engage and champion perhaps things that we may or may not have a great deal of information about at the fore, but that we can seek out. I think that becoming accomplices inside things that don't relate to your lived experiences are the future. Collective liberation work is the future. And as we mentioned, the young people engaging and most definitely honoring the elders in community that have sustained us and continue to engage with this work. I think it's vital that there's an interconnectedness between generations, that the knowledge keepers have opportunity to engage with the youth and to bring fullness into the steps that we're going to take to move forward that will bring us towards collective liberation. And by this I mean, as we look at our intersectional identities, as we look at the interconnectedness of our movements, but fundamentally that we need to be working together, that it's not, anti-Black racism is not an issue that the Black community has to solve. It's an issue that the world at large needs to engage in. We know the discrimination that we've experienced. Others need to engage and to be able to articulate ways to counter that, right? It's not enough to just stand on the sidelines and hope that it's all going to shift. People need to recognize the labor that Black, Brown, Indigenous communities have been engaged in, and to step up and to move in to the movement, move in to the action that needs to be taken, and to not shy away from the challenges and sometimes pain that comes from birthing new possibilities. Because then you get that beautiful birthed collective liberation.
Yes. Yes, we all need to do it together. Okay, Lyra.
In terms of the sex workers' rights movement, we're always talking about decriminalization, and I think this is a central push in the work that's going on right now, is for decriminalization of sex work in all aspects, as opposed to legalization, which is what's sort of on the mainstream agenda, or is in the mainstream conversation is legalization. But we know that when laws are applied to industries such as sex work, the most marginalized sex workers are the ones who are going to be made illegal by legalization. So we want decriminalization. We also would love to see sex workers having decision-making power in laws and in different environments that affect us. So right now, there's a lot going on around censorship and online on porn online, and these decisions are going to affect sex workers, but sex workers are not being allowed to speak to the appropriate committees because supposedly it's not a sex worker issue, but really it is. So the sex workers' rights movement has borrowed from the disability movement, nothing about us without us. And so that's a really important aspect. I would say for young people, it's really important to be outspoken about support for various marginalized communities, because beyond decriminalization, there's stigma. And even if we get sex work decriminalized in all ways, there will still be that stigma that marginalizes sex workers. So even if people aren't involved in sex work or don't have lived experience of sex work, showing support, making it clear that they believe sex work is really important, and looking at the intersections of different issues that marginalized communities face. I would say a decentering of whiteness is going to be really important, both in the sex workers' rights movement and in the trans rights movement, and really coming at both of those with an anti-racist practice is going to be super important and something that doesn't always happen. But yeah, those are a few things I'm hoping for. Thank you.
Thanks. Those are all great things for people to work towards. And Sleydo.
Yeah, so what is our vision? Liberation for everybody. So there's lots of things that are going on, and a few things. I mean, maybe I'll touch first on the youth and the young people. Is I really feel like it's their time right now. It's time that we stand up and support them. You know, provide whatever teachings that we've learned along the way, but also for young people to really connect with their elders and their teachings, and to bring that forth in a way, you know, in a really kind and gentle way into our movements that connect all of our movements, because I think that that's such important work. And I agree 100%, like, we don't have Indigenous liberation if we don't have liberation for Black folks and for trans folks and for everybody. You know, all of the injustices in the world right now are connected. And so we see that. And I think that that's something that, you know, that young people can really grab onto, is to connect all of those pieces and to connect our movements. And that's something that I'm envisioning in the near future, and something that's been born out of, you know, COVID and being locked down, is this connecting to one another and finding new ways to connect to one another. And so I think that that's really important. I also think that this project and other projects like it, like the Trans Mountain Project and the CGL Pipeline Project, are precedents in so-called British Columbia and so-called Canada, and that they're going to set a precedent for how governments and industry deal with Indigenous people on our territories. And so I think that that's so important, because it's not just a pipeline. It's not just Coastal GasLink that we're protesting this pipeline. That's definitely not the whole story at all. It goes so much deeper than that. And it's going to set a precedent for how we live in the world, and how industry and governments interact with our territories and the people, and, you know, climate change and all of those things. So I really feel like looking to the nearest future, this isn't something that's going to go away this year. It's not going to go away when COVID's over. It's going to be ongoing for several years. And if we don't do something drastic and set a precedent now, which is exactly what the government's trying to do, they're trying to set the precedent with this to say, hey, Indigenous rights, yeah, we'll celebrate that. And at the same time, we're going to do what we want, business as usual. And so we have to take that stand, and we have to grow our strength, and we have to do something now before it's too late, because it's so close to that tipping point already. And so that's my vision for the future, is to connect those movements, to become stronger, and also to be implementing the UNDRIP. You know, it's not something that I put all my weight into and behind, but it's also a tool that we can use, because we need to be implementing for example, how does Wet'suwet'en law implement the UNDRIP? So it's not going to be a cookie cutter approach where they say, okay, this is how the Canadian government is going to implement UNDRIP for Indigenous people. No, Indigenous nations say how we implement the UNDRIP according to our laws on our land. And it cannot be an overall cookie cutter approach for this. We need to be the ones doing the work on the ground. We need to have the capacity and the time and the space to do that work in order to move forward in a good way. So I think that it can be a useful piece of legislation, but I also think that it has to be flipped on its head in a different way, and that we have to be doing the work on the ground. So like, what does that look like, free, prior, informed consent on Wet'suwet'en territory? Well, we're showing you what it's looking like on Wet'suwet'en territory. We're showing the world what it's looking like, and we're getting thrown in jail for it. And so the decriminalization of land defense as well is something that I really want to push for. And that, as we saw, in the case of the Trans Mountain just recently, that an elder was sentenced with 90 days in jail for performing a ceremony on the territory. And so I think that that was to show and set a precedent that, okay, you're all going to start going to jail for significant amounts of time. And so it's important that we show our strength, and that we're not going to adhere to these colonial laws that are meant to scare us and threaten us from being who we are as Indigenous people. So those are some things that I think are going to really come to the forefront in the future, that we have to be ready for, and we have to prepare for, and we have to stand strong in who we are and what we have to do according to our own ways. Oh, I also forgot about this. I was going to mention in the COVID stuff, one thing that our people have been focusing on is, I don't know if y'all seen the short documentary Invasion, but our media team's been working on a longer feature film documentary. But Invasion is up for a lot of different awards, and I just want to put a little plug in. There's a free online film festival in March 20th and 21st through mutualaidmedia.com. And so it's all about front lines, all these short documentaries about the front lines. So check it out. It's something that our team's been working on during the last year of lockdown, and getting the word out there and really supporting all the front lines, because we all know how exhausting it is. We all know how much energy it takes, and we all need to be doing whatever we can to support each other. Outside.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who follows that? Like, why? Why am I talking?
You do. God, you got this.
Wow. I love the big vision questions. I love future casting. I love futurism. Like that's my jam as a storyteller, right? So when I talk about being a storyteller, I also say so the stories that I carry are not my own. What's happening in my lifetime belongs to my descendants, and what I know now has been carried from my ancestors, and that's really powerful for me. But what that means is the way that I'm living my life is the story that I'm telling for the future. So I love questions like this. And it means to be brave and be courageous in the way that we dream. I imagine a world that is Indigenous-led governance, right? That is decolonized Indigenous-led governance based on these traditional lands and these old ways, because we know that they work. We know that they work for 15,000 years. And then, our non-native neighbors, the settler colonialists, decide that their little baby 200-year governments are somehow superseding what we know to be true based on land and language, cultural ties and kinship. I believe in decolonized land back, right? Not just land back where we all own all the homes. No, where the land has consent over the way that she's used, and that she's restored to her balance and strength. And I imagine, a future where Indigenous folks have to provide consent, not consultation, right? Consent and consultation are not the same thing. And right now, the United States especially is big on listening sessions, only for them to disregard what it is that we're saying based on 15,000-year-old knowledge. I imagine a world with no police, no law enforcement. We didn't have them prior to contact, and we don't need them, and we don't need them in the future. I'm a practicing abolitionist. So what that means is that my focus and priority is going to be on meeting the immediate needs of my people, while at the same time dismantling the systems that cause their immediate needs in the first place. If they have no food, that's not a problem of the community. That's a problem of the state that failed them. If they have no home, that is not a problem of the community. That is a problem of the system that failed them. And in the process, focusing on mutual aid is an act of abolition, right? It means that we're working outside the system in a wildly and profoundly decolonized way, so that we provide for ourselves in a way that's based on community care being the most decolonized way that we have lived for, again, 16,000 years. That sounds pretty intense, and that's a big dream, but I think it's entirely possible, right? The United States is a 250-year-old experiment that has failed. And what I need is for my fellow Americans to realize that this is a failed experiment. We're just an ant farm on fire. We really have some things that we need to do to fix it. And we have tangible knowledge led by and for the Indigenous people of this country and across Turtle Island, to be able to put nature back in balance, and so that we can protect the sacred or what's left of her. my advice for young people, if there's ever an adult that tells you that's the way it's always done, fight them, right? Like that's literally the worst advice an adult could ever give a young person. That's the way it's always done. No, damn that. That's not the way it's always done. That's the way that's comfortable. That's the way that's safe. And that's the way that protects privilege and power. So if that's what you hear from somebody, immediately dismantle whatever it is that you're asking to dismantle. So that's my advice for young folks. Stay diligent. Stay tenacious, stay aggressive, stay assertive, stay loud. Like those are the things that we need in our movement spaces now, because quiet, passive, comfortable is not the way that we're going to get our land back. It's not the way we're going to be able to seek and find liberation for one another. So that's my rant and I'm sticking to it. Yo, Kalo.
Sleydo and I are moving next door to you. We're all it's gonna happen. It's happening. It's happening. I mean, we're all basically neighbors anyhow, right? So we just gotta work on all the barriers in between us to get them all to fall in line. Okay, our last pre-written question here. So this is a question I've had when I've been on panels, and I'm like, but the more I sort of like chew on it, and I'm like, this is a really important question, and I've been working really hard on answering this question for myself every day. So what keeps you going? How are you sustaining yourself? And what are your sources of joy? Where's the joy? So Lyra.
I really love meditating. I don't do it enough lately, but I like it. I love getting outside. I live near the forest, which I'm so grateful for. So just taking walks in nature is huge. I draw joy from my cat back there. She's great most of the time. And I think even though the work of organizing and community development can be really challenging, I also find joy in it, and my opportunity to serve a membership that I care a lot about, and to keep learning at my organization that is so beautiful. And I'm really thankful for all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Siobhan, where's your joy?
Well, I also meditate and do breath work, both personally and as programs to share with others. Right now, I would say that laughter, connecting with things that bring laughter into my life. I need laughter bubbles to lift the darkness and let things be a bit lighter. And that can come in many forms. Sometimes that's through friends and family. Sometimes that's through ridiculous online options of podcasts or shows or articles or books. Sometimes that's through cooking and giving back to others. I love cooking, and that brings a lot of joy. My father was the main cook in our family, but my grandmother helped to found Grace Kitchens, and although not accredited, many of the recipes that are still being enjoyed to this day under that moniker come through her efforts and her creation. And really, anything that can bring forth the resilience needed to continue to engage. This is a long journey. Some elements may be experienced in my lifetime, but my work is for future generations. I carry the teachings of my ancestors and engage to gift to what will be next generations coming forward. And really reconnecting with ancestral teachings brings me a lot of joy. And it's not an easy road because as a descendant of stolen people living on stolen lands, language, culture, family lineage, things along these lines are inaccessible for many people within the African diaspora. And so opportunities to reconnect, to create new traditions bring a lot of joy.
Thank you so much. Okay, Tai.
I'm still learning like where to find and to be joyful. And I don't say that in a complicated way. I just say that because I wasn't shown what joy looks like. I've been given a lot of gifts from my ancestors and from the folks that I find as or lean on as role models, but joyful, intentional, joyful moments weren't something that I was shown. Everything was a ceremony and there's joy to be found there. Everything is felt so serious because of the risk at any point of loss, right? So that's a moment of trauma. And I also, what is also intergenerational is my shame for feeling joy, right? So in the face of deep tragedy, where can we find joy shamelessly? And I'm still working on that for myself. I do know in beloved community we share a lot of laughter together, and we do make sure that we enjoy our favorite things. I keep going off camera, and thank you for your patience with that, because my dogs decide to run zoomies behind this curtain, and so like trying to wrangle my dogs while like mildly irritating in the middle of this panel is actually really joyful for me, because my dogs are just having a moment of joy. Like, let's just run hot laps in the living room. It's fine. So I do love my dogs very much. I've been an avid reader my whole life. So making space and room for reading and reading anything. Like I'm a collector of knowledge as much as I can be. Storytelling also involves certain cultural practices like basket weaving and beadwork, and I find a great deal of joy in those things as well, especially since I wasn't raised as a weaver. I was raised as a beadwork artist, but not as a weaver. So being able to do beadwork has been very joyful for me, and relearning and rejuvenating this skill of weaving has been very exciting and very joyful for me. So my joy lives in a lot of deep cultural practice on my Indigenous side, but I do want to echo Siobhan in that, like, being able to find cultural practices as a descendant of stolen people, right? Like that can be very complicated and look very interesting. So we'll see what that looks like as time moves on. Thank you. Yochkalo.
Awesome. Sleydo, what keeps you going and where's your joy?
Well, I have this one spot down by the lake at our cabin where we live, underneath a spruce tree. And there's this little island. And at the end of the lake, our lake is about 10 kilometers long. And at the end of the lake, there's just mountain ranges. And so that's my little timeout spot when things get really bad that I have to go to for like 10, 15 minutes just to get a little bit of peace. But definitely my kids. I have a son and 2 daughters, and they are fierce. I have a 5-year-old who I am afraid for the colonizing world when she grows up, because her and her little friends are just, yeah, they are amazing. And the things that come out of their mouths make me so happy. And they're just like the fiercest little matriarchs that I've ever seen in my life. And I know they're not the only ones, which makes me really happy too, that there's other really young women that are coming up in this world. And so on a family level, it's really my kids that keep me grounded. You know, I could be in the middle of like having conflicts with the RCMP and CGL on a day-to-day basis. And then, you know, and then I go back to them and they really keep me grounded and keep me happy. And then I also think on a community level, definitely being on the territory and engaging with other people. We have a matriarch, Timberwolf, that we do language with, and I taught her how to FaceTime. Got her an iPad and taught her how to FaceTime. And a lot of our other Takaise are matriarchs and elder chiefs. They call themselves the baby Zoomers now, because they're all on Zoom. And so it's really amazing and really fun to get together in those ways and still be connected to one another. So I really have to take that time to be able to do those things. But also I really love panels like this. Like I don't know if all of you feel it, but like this work can be so isolating. Like sometimes you just feel like it's just you and against the world. And when you're in it and you're just deep in it, it can feel sometimes like you're just so alone in it. And sometimes it can be really hard in community too, especially if, you know, for us, we live in a really small community. And so there's a very clear, you know, line between you know, people that are in line with our values and teachings and people who aren't, and all the racism in our small northern rural communities is pretty prevalent. So it just makes me feel really connected to everybody and also inspired by all these amazing people and all of the things that you say, and to know that, you know, we are not alone and that we have so many people that are going to change the world, that people are changing the world, and that we don't have to do it all on our own. Woohoo! So thanks for being there, and thanks for doing the work. And yeah, those things really make me happy and inspire me. And I always feel really good at the end of these kinds of panels that it's a lot. It's a load off for sure, I would say.
Oh, yeah, I'm super inspired, and so feel so much joy from all of your answers. When I was asked this question, my answer was Indigenous meme makers. Like Indigenous meme makers have like gotten me through some of the toughest parts of the pandemic. That's where a lot of my joy has come from in some really hard times. So appreciate everybody's time and energy and connection today. It's such an incredible, powerful conversation to connect all of our movements and to connect all of us together and to find friends and allies and comrades and sisters and relatives where we didn't know we had them before. So definitely feel that today. And we are just about out of time, I believe. Yes, we've got 2 minutes left.
I saw one question come through that I feel really passionate about. Do you mind if I give that a
I don't. I was just going to read the question out and see if anybody had it in there to answer. So, okay, so the question that we had dropped for us in the chat was, how can those working from within the system be most effective at helping to achieve transformative change? Is change from within the system ever transformational?
Thank you for the time. I do want to be mindful of folks' time and honor that. I'm also a decolonizer of time, so we'll finish when we finish. Have you ever tried to stop an elder in the middle of prayer? Yeah, no, nobody ever does that. Okay, so no, easy answer is no. None of these systems brought in by settler colonialists will ever be transformational. That's the idea from Audre Lorde, right? The master's tools will never dismantle or cannot dismantle the master's house. And if you are in the system, you can make it as accessible as possible, right? Like you can make it accessible. Is it easy to read? Is it easy to access online? Is there somebody who can explain legalese? Is there somebody who can help you jump through red tape and hoops? Because we know that there's a lot of bureaucracy attached to that, but there is nothing transformational about anything settler colonial. Like, and that's, that's the hill I will die on. The reason why I feel passionately about this is because this is the question when folks are like, Tai, when are you going to run for political office? When are you going to run for this? I won't run for the master's house. Like, I'm not going to do it. And I feel very passionate, like, because that's asking somebody, especially a Black and Indigenous woman, to walk into a Shark Tank / wolf den, however that looks, to be able to navigate that space without any support system or kinship or land or language to keep me grounded. And so if you are within the system, you're not doing transformational work. If you are in the system with transformational ideology, do what you can, but know that you are still going to be trapped because the settler colonial system is not designed for transformation, revolution, or liberation. So again, that's my rant. I'm going to stick to that one too.
That's great. So that's, thank you for that. Very powerful words. Okay. We're wrapping it up now. So I just really want to remind folks that there's an opportunity for attendees to come together. You had to have registered by 4 o'clock, so hopefully you did that. And then there's another link where you can go and join some breakout rooms and have some conversations and network and hang out and all those fun things that we used to do in person. Panelists, we have our own separate link for a debrief of our time together, where we would be high-fiving and hugging in the before times. And I think that's it. I think we did it all. Go ahead, Siobhan.
Well, I was just going to say, as someone who often misses instructions, I'm wondering, is there a reason or a way to make that link available for folks that have already registered and might have missed the 4 o'clock timeline?
Justine is on it, and I believe she's been communicating with attendees in the chat and via email to make sure people have access to that. Yeah, and it's all been, Justine's taking care of it because we're trying to avoid the Zoom bombers and the people who do the things. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. We're going to have a nice Zoom wave because, oh, come on, Zoom wave.